Okay, so this section is about basically getting free of any encumbrances that would keep you from doing this. The primary one being your living situation. So if if you're under a lease right now, then we'll talk about how to get out of the lease. Obviously, if you own your home, that's a different scenario. You're looking at, do you sell it? Can you rent it? Um, we had people in our group where, like, I know one girl's brother took over and started living in their house, and so that's what made it work. But I'm going to assume that if you own your house, you know the options there. You can sell it or you can rent it. I think most people will likely be under a lease, so that's the one that we'll talk about today, and then we'll talk about a few other scenarios too. So with a lease, and this is why I had you get your lease agreement, you want to bring that out and review that. And what you're looking for here basically is any gotchas there. So what are first off, when does your lease end? If it ends before the program, then obviously go month to month, and this isn't an issue. But assuming that your lease, maybe you're locked into like a 6-month or a year lease, and you want to leave earlier than that, okay, now let's look at the options. What are my options for getting out of this lease? So in the agreement, what you want to be looking for is early termination penalties. That's a phrase, just look for that. Meaning, can you pay an extra month, end it prematurely by just paying an extra month or something. So early termination is one option. You're looking for something called subrogation, basically the ability to transfer that lease to someone else. And step back here, like from your landlord's perspective, really what they want is a tenant who pays their bills on time and doesn't trash their place, right? So that's your landlord's goal, are those two things. So they have a responsible tenant with you right now, and you're on time with your bills. They don't want to lose that, and there's verbiage in the lease that may bind you to staying for a certain time period. But everything is negotiable. That's one thing I've learned. And so your job now is to figure out, what leverage do I have here? Like, what are my options? What am I bound by in the contract? Basically, how can I go to my landlord and make this a no-brainer where they'll let me out of my lease? So early termination is one way out. Obviously, you'd rather not pay a penalty if you don't have to, so look and see what the options are for replacing yourself. And subrogation, I'll link to what that term is under the video, but subrogation is the ability to transfer your lease to someone else, so see if it allows for that. The other option here is subletting. So can you find another tenant where you're still the person on the lease, but you're then turning around and subletting it to someone else? So that's the third option here that would allow you to do this, right? So that's really the lease scenario. And what I'm going to have you do, we'll talk about this in the homework, but the next step, once you understand the situation, is to basically have this employer conversation or the landlord conversation. So other encumbrances now that could hold you back. I am just assuming that you have ruled out all the showstoppers. So again, like if you have dependents, this becomes a lot more difficult. Not impossible. I actually have a buddy, this guy Scott, who took his whole family, like stored all their stuff, sold the rest, closed down, severed all ties in the U.S. and basically took his whole family, his wife and 2 kids, on the road. They've been traveling through Mexico and Central and I think now South America. And he's homeschooling his kids, and his job, he owns his own business and he does it from the road. So I'm sure that's an amazing experience for those kids to grow up that way. Assuming though, that like 99% of the people, if you have dependents, this is gonna be really hard. Other things, like I said, like caring for an elderly parent might hold you back. Anything that holds you in the U.S., like if you're a truck driver, this is going to be very difficult to get up and plop around and move like this. Or maybe that's a bad example, like a dentist, I guess. But there's certain jobs where this is not going to work. So I'm just assuming that you've ruled out the showstoppers here, and that now we're talking about those. Okay, we can work with this, but how do we make it work? So relationship is an obvious one. The questions there are, can your significant other travel with you? If you're in a relationship, are they in a position where they could take their job on the road? We had 2 couples in our groups, Lisbeth and Stefan, and then TJ and Liz. These 2 couples, and they made it the whole year on a remote year, and it worked great for them. So if your significant other can't travel with you, then the question becomes, like, can you make the long distance thing work? and really that's up to you. We did have two people that made it work in our group, Carrie and Lily. There are definitely things that you can do that make that more likely to work. Talk quickly about what those are. Obviously, like regular visitations, having, whether if you're on the road, having your significant other join the group for a while, or you going back home for periods. And I would say like no less than every 2 months doing that. And then obviously those folks that made it work talked all the time. So it is doable. I was in this situation where I was in a relationship, but I just, I ended it. Like, to me, I did a kind of a hard look at things, and this was important enough to me that I really wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it without feeling like I was half-assing it. Like, in other words, I didn't want to like be partially like trying to make a relationship work, but having, not being there. Basically, the long distance thing to me just doesn't make sense. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I just ended my relationship to do it. This is something that's up to you, though. I can't really give you, I'm a horrible person to give relationship advice, so you're gonna have to make the call. But just know that people have made it work. It's challenging, but there's travel bloggers and whatnot out there who will write about what's involved in making that work. So and I'll try to find a few of those and link to them. All right, so the last thing to talk about in this section, just because this one's really common, is pets. Do you have a pet that you can't be away from for a year? We had people in our group that same thing. It's like having a relationship of a different kind that would like FaceTime with their dog, and then obviously see it when they went back. So I didn't have a pet, but this is something that, again, you just have to make this decision if you can be away from your animal. I know that these groups, all the ones that I know, they do not allow pets, so that would be something to consider. But solo travel, maybe you could bring your animal on the road if that was a concern. All right, so those are all the encumbrances I can think of. Like I said, in the homework section, we'll just review what you need to do with the lease. In the next section, what we're going to talk about is selecting the right travel program, right? And then this will be the last one, and then we'll do the homework.